All right, so this is the May 10th meeting of the Faculty Advisory Committee to the CSU Board of Regents. What I'd like to start with is approval of the agenda, and I will share my screen just to show everyone the agenda there. I will mention that Lori Lamb, item 6, I noted that as tentative on the agenda originally, and due to a scheduling conflict, or maybe as many as 3 scheduling conflicts, she's not able to attend today, so that will not take place just because she's not here. But
Motion to approve agenda.
okay, thanks, Andre. Andre moves to approve the agenda. Is there a second?
I'm good for something, right?
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Andre. Matt Key is joining. Cool. All right, so I guess, do we need to have a vote on the agenda? I can't remember if that's required. Yeah, let's do that. So all those in favor of approving the agenda, please say aye.
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 Okay, and
Aye.
anyone opposed?
Nah.
Okay. Any abstentions? Okay, great. Thank you so much. So next, let's look at approval of the minutes. I did circulate 2 copies of the minutes. I think one was an amendment to the March 8th, the final approved version of minutes. But we also have the April 19th minutes to consider. And thank you very much, Lois, for the minutes. So do we have a motion to approve the minutes?
Moved.
Thank you, Andre. And second, thank you very much. So any discussion? All right, so no discussion. I don't hear any discussion. So all in favor, say aye.
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 Okay, thank you. Any opposed, say nay. Any abstentions? Okay, so the minutes are approved. All right, so we'll move to our next agenda item, which is the report of the chair and the vice chair. I do have just a couple of slides for my report, so I'm going to share my screen again and talk about one. The focus of my discussion will be on developments in the General Assembly over the past week or so. So I will just present that material. It will not be that long, and we can kind of move on from there. So as I said, this is my chair report, and I do want to focus on the additional funding which the General Assembly has approved. It is, I believe, still pending the governor's signature, but it does appear that the General Assembly and the governor have decided to sort of reverse the CSCU cuts that looked like they were coming down the road, and the mechanism employed to do that appears to be the sort of remaining ARPA funds that the state has available. And you've probably seen a few news stories about this. The total amount, some of these are approximations, but the total amount of additional funding approved was $80 million. Just as a reminder, the system office at one point was reporting a deficit for CSCU of approximately $46 million for the year in question. And so the good news is that through the hard work of many people, faculty, students, staff, the work of the system office, seems like we're on a path to cover that deficit and sort of be in a healthier position in fiscal year 25. And that's, good news in some sense. And again, do appreciate all the work done by everybody to make this happen. And, the only question then becomes what happens with this. I don't even really want to call it additional $33 million, but, where will those funds be allocated? That's the question that's foremost of my mind. I think the answer to that question is going to depend upon the source of payment for the cost of living adjustment that was agreed to by the state and CBAC. I call this a cost of living adjustment. I've heard various terms like raises, but I do want to remind everybody that inflation averaged about 6% since August of 21. And so in my mind, as an economist, what this agreement does is make sure that we're keeping pace with at least part of the increase in the cost of living that we're all sort of facing. So let me go to the next. Now, one interesting quote I heard about this question of where the cost of living funds will come from came from CT Mirror. And the quote was, traditionally, the legislature and governor have provided colleges and universities with resources only to cover raises for positions funded through the state budget. And I actually found this, I think I've heard this perspective in a couple of places. I find it extraordinarily confusing, and I would just kind of like to explain why. So the notion here is that there are sort of two types of dollars at play in CSCU. One type of dollar is the type of dollar that comes from the state, people paying their taxes and that sort of thing. Excuse me. And I think in this quote, the notion is that those dollars go towards state-funded positions, like certain people in CSCU are paid through state funding. And then, other dollars, most of them coming from students, I guess you would then, claim that those are student-funded positions. And so I find this very, very confusing, this notion that our positions are funded through different dollars, because they're all dollars, right? So this is actually reality from my perspective. So they're all dollars. They all come into CSCU, and every position is funded out of those dollars. And it's important to think about things this way because I think with the alternative non-reality view, there's a notion that sort of percentages should stay fixed and forever in some sense. And I'm not sure that's something everyone would necessarily agree with. So further to this, everyone at CSCU is in the state of Connecticut open payroll database. Everyone is a state employee. Students are a top priority, but we're not actually employed through the dollars that students pay. Those are obviously extremely important, but it's a one pool of funds that pays everybody, and we are state employees. So when the state arranges a cost of living increase, it seems to me that the state should pay for those and not pass the buck. I think about this a little bit in terms of sort of what happens in other forms of public education. Like for example, like a high school or something like that. Obviously, we are different than those, but the notion of something being public is that everyone contributes to the investment, right, in people's education. If you're enrolled in a public institution, you're not paying more simply because a member of your family or someone there is actually in the school, right? So those are just some perspectives I have on things. Now, a couple of more notes about the developments in the General Assembly. There may be another $20 million in funding around the end of the year, but there's a paragraph describing the conditions under which that might happen, and there's references to multiple Connecticut statutes, and it seems like it's a pretty complicated thread that's been woven there, so I'm not exactly sure under what conditions that might happen. But we do have additional room to maneuver from a sort of financial perspective this year because the impasse over the retirement incentive plan with the faculty bargaining units means there's less outlays than maybe was initially planned, depending upon how that was modeled. So the big question is, will the BOR reduce tuition costs as soon as possible? Will they reverse the 5% increase that took place on top of other increases in the recent past? I don't have an answer to that question, but it's one thing I've been wondering, and hopefully those conversations are taking place. And just a couple of other developments that are probably relevant for us. The legislation that was passed now places the OPM director as an ex officio member of the Board of Regents. And there's a new, I'm thinking of this as a financial sustainability committee to engage in planning for public higher education. And so looking forward, we now may find ourselves in a situation in the fall where we sort of have three sort of guiding principles or guiding documents. The NCHEMS report, which is closely associated with OPM, Social Venture Partners, which has been visiting campuses. I think they've been to all CSU campuses at this point, and I've heard some things about community college visits as well, and this Financial Sustainability Committee report. And so another question for me is sort of how these three things are going to be combined, or which one will be deliberative. So I will stop there. Those are my comments. Mike Shea raised his hand. I don't know. I want to ask Kalina, should we take questions, comments now, or did you want to do your brief at this point, Kalina?
Questions, comments are fine. I'll maybe just follow up a little bit on what you just presented, but yeah, it's fine.
Okay, cool.
But Mike.
All right, Mike, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Brendan, for that information, and thanks, Kalina, for the go ahead. But the information, especially Brendan, really helpful. First of all, you said that several things I want to ask you about. One is you said the OPM office will be on the board. Is that a new decision?
Yes, so essentially there is a statute establishing the BOR, and it specifies who the members are.
Correct.
And that statute was altered to now
Okay.
state that the
In
OPM.
this last session, it was altered.
Correct.
In
Okay.
the last week or this
Okay,
week.
thank you. And then the other thing is, I want to go all the way back to the increase and the way you divided up the money that's being applied. That's really helpful and confusing. And I want to go back to that. But before we get to that, I wanted to ask you about the OPM. Could you just put up that last slide?
Yes. Just 1 second.
Oh, I know what it was. Your question about will they? No, you don't need to put it up. Thanks. The question was, will they rescind the 5%? Are you saying that they might still do that this year, or do you mean in the long run? I mean, this year's over, right?
I believe the 5% is for the coming year. So.
Oh, the 5% doesn't start this fall?
Yeah, it does.
Right. So I don't think they're
Okay.
going to rescind the 5% for this fall because this is the last session they had before.
Yeah, so I agree. We have a little bit of a challenge here from the sense that there's actually 3 calendars in play. So
Okay.
there's the calendar, January to December, then there's a fiscal calendar, July to July or
Yeah.
June and then we have the academic year calendar. So the monies we're talking about are fiscal year 25 monies, right?
Yes.
So they're coming online in July. I don't know exactly the
Yes.
distribution of those. And so the question would be, you know, what is going to be done with those?
Yeah.
And
My,
yeah.
my guess is that because of the money we did get on this past week, that it does not include the money to rescind the 5% tuition. I can't imagine that's going to happen before this coming year. I'm hoping they'll do it in the long run, but not immediately. But what I also liked was when you laid out one of the things that really bothered me about the OPM's discussion when they were not giving us the money last year was they were sort of disingenuous in saying that we were depending on much on the free funds from the federal government, and once they stopped, they were claiming that we wanted them to keep funding the money from the federal government, and that's not right. What we were trying to do was replace the money that we all got the raises from. We were glad to get the raises from Lamont, but if, as I understand it, that had to come out of the block funding. Not this is what you were raising about separate funding should be the employees should be paid separately from the block funding. So what happened was, you know, it was great. We got the raise, and I'm sure that made, you know, the union happy with Lamont, and I'm sure he got a lot of votes. But in a way, he's making us pay for that raise by taking away from the money that would go into operating costs for this university. So, and they never admitted that or never talked about that. Is that what you want? I mean, I'm not an economist. I'm just an English professor. So I don't follow this, but I mean, I not don't follow. I have trouble following the exact, but it seemed to me that that's what was happening was the raises we got were what was really causing us to have a fiscal problem, not poor spending on our part and things like that. Is that right from your point of view as an economist? Is that an accurate assessment that we were now down funds because we had to pay the raises and the cost of living increases out of money that was allocated to the universities?
Yeah, so it is a little bit tricky to put all these things together, and but
Yeah.
but I do believe it's the case that there is at least a philosophy that costs should be quote unquote shared across the state and the students, which is a little weird, right? Because the states are the students. But
I mean,
yeah,
it felt like we took the money from the student. Lamont gave us a raise, and he took the money from the students in a sense by giving us a raise, but didn't give us the money to pay for the raise. He just gave us the normal money that we would get with all these extra. It was like an unfunded mandate, and it just seemed. And they never said that, and we never said that clearly in public. And I was kind of annoyed that OPM would keep saying, "Oh, you just want the money from federal government to keep moving." That's not true. We wanted, thanks for giving us the raise, but the state needed to pay for that, not the universities.
Can I
Yeah,
expand on that just a little bit? And like, I'll try not to make it too messy, but like there's a couple of levels at which this is happening. So there's our last contract, which was negotiated during sort of the COVID years when lots of federal money was coming in, which was approved by the legislature. And it's being approved by the legislature. One would think that block grant funding coming after that, right? So that would have been, it was approved like 2022, I think, retroactive to 2021 or something like that. One would think that the block grant would take into consideration the added cost of raises that they approved. And yet it did not. But there's also the element of the fact that the way we are the only sort of state agency that is considered to have an additional revenue source. But the additional revenue source is our students who themselves already pay in, right? So that operating fund, like pot of money, is never funded, not only from the block grant, but also from the fact that in an off-budget year like this one, if we have a wage increase or anything like that, every other state agency gets money out of the RSA, right? Reserve salary, something. I forget what it's called. It's a fund made to fund our increases that we were not budgeted for, because it's an off budget year. And yet that also doesn't cover our operating fund employees. So there's a chance that part of that will eat into even this increase, which, and that I think is just a matter of, it's that philosophy that we have an additional source of revenue, but the additional source of revenue is right. And I think that's something we need to address in the long run.
So,
Because if we want to
Helena,
address
can I
tuition,
just, when you
yeah,
talked about the additional source of revenue, in a sense, what's happening is that we're raising tuition on students because, in a sense, to pay for those raises, right? That's what you mean, right?
yes, and it
Yeah, okay.
appears to be OPM's position that that is the appropriate source of the funding of those raises, and
Oh.
I think we disagree completely. Yeah,
I think we should make both the unions and maybe the Senate, somebody's got to make that a clearer picture for the public, because that to me was just a bunch of, I mean, yes, thanks for the raise, but if you had told me the students were going to pay for my raise, I think I would have said, we don't want that raise, we want state raise. So I don't think anybody knows that that's what's happened.
Yeah.
And therefore they can sort of suggest that, that they were just, I didn't think OPM was very clear about, they were trying to muddle, whether deliberately or accidentally, muddling, why we were low on money. It was because we had to pay the raises and the cost
they
of living.
haven't funded it. Yeah,
Thank you.
and it is about an interpretation of the wording of the statute that says where that money's supposed to come from in terms of the RSA for this and so on. It's just an interpretation that does not seem appropriate.
Okay, thank you. That's very helpful for both of you. I appreciate it.
Andre, you have your hand up?
Yeah, just a short comment. This budgeting system that we have, it's neither about economics nor philosophy. It's about alchemy.
Yeah,
And what we're making is a very poor generation coming up behind us.
Yep. All right. I don't see any more hands, so Kalina, floor is yours for your report.
Sure. Maybe I'll just expand a little bit on the legislative stuff and then talk about ASA this morning, I think. I don't know how many of you, like the implementer is like 350 pages long plus an amendment, right? So if you're trying to find this stuff, the 80 million's on page 2, right at the beginning, but the 20 million is on line 91. The PACT expansion for transitional students is on lines 2,111 to 2,115. Beckham on the BOR is line 3340. And I think it's notable that it's just him. It's not him or his appointee or representative. It's just him. So, And then the higher ed financial oversight or sustainability committee or whatever is section 107. You're looking for that. And yeah, I mean, there's a huge difference between what we got and what the administration officially asked for, right? And the hits that in terms of the mitigation plan, the CSCU administration seemed to say they were willing to accept. Their narrative was only, as far as I could tell publicly, give us about $47 million so that we don't have to lay off any full-time permanent employees. Everything else was up for grabs. The money that we did get, which is a total of 100 million if you include the 20 million, which we seem like we're in a good enough position that it should come through in November, was justified by our unions in terms of covering the entirety of the reported deficit for the system, plus $20 million planned to be raised for the tuition increase. And it is, I have seen a desire among legislators, et cetera, to really actually roll back that tuition increase. I think it is logistically like difficult, especially given the FAFSA situation this year. You don't want to mess with too much of that, right? But it is, I think there's a desire there, and if it's at all possible, that's going to happen, right? And I also just want to draw attention to like how this got done. I don't know if Brendan, you can list some of the things. AUP was crazy active all the way through. I can tell you what 4Cs did. We had an email campaign in the fall with about 1,700 emails. We had a town hall with Matt Ritter, Speaker of the House, where 300 folks showed up and asked him to commit to funding higher ed and to a change in the guardrails going forward. We had a town hall with Senator Looney, and that was about 200 folks. Rojas, House Majority Leader, 100 people. For the appropriations hearings, we had 100+ testimonies submitted, and lots of verbal testimony. We did phone banking at 6 of our chapters. We did targeted constituent meetings with legislators who were on the fence. We had a student picket at Three Rivers, and we had a May 4th Recovery for All coalition-wide rally at the Capitol. It wasn't easy. It took a lot of work out of a lot of us to do the thing that I believe the system office is tasked with doing, its sole responsibility. And I think we were successful, and I'm really proud of what we did, but we're damn near dead, right? Who cares? We were successful. I say all that to say, I think it was especially important that from the beginning, what we addressed along with this was the fiscal guardrails of the state. Because to me, the fiscal guardrails and the plan for the consolidation arose at the same time and attempted to do the exact same thing. They were trying to shrink state spending, the consolidation, and this constructed financial crisis right at the opening of our consolidated college, along with the restrictions of the fiscal guardrails, were supposed to achieve that aim.
All right, stop.
So in order to actually address it, we had to jump ahead to the real issue, which was the statewide budget problem that we're just like collateral damage for. So, I mean, I just think it's important to emphasize that, because we have seen such a change in the way that legislators talk about our self-imposed spending restrictions, which is not to say that the guardrails are necessarily bad. They just weren't constructed in a way that they would actually achieve their aims, because they were done in a hurry and they weren't studied. So, they're looking more closely now that we have however many years, 7 years of evidence to say, how can we responsibly change them to actually achieve their aims? So I think it's so important to see that is happening. Unfortunately, this all came way too late for, the nonsense of, because the consolidation was equally badly planned and executed, but, here we are. But it will mean, I think I'm very proud of what we all did this session. Next year, we're going to have to work that much harder to get an actual budget solution in place for many, many years. So like, for me, I'm just like, celebrate for 10 seconds and then let's go again. So that's where I am. All right. So that's what I have to say about that. And then I can talk about ASA this morning really quickly. Okay. So Western gave a sort of NECHI update that's on page 9 of the agenda and is right at the beginning sort of the meeting recording. Promotions, tenure, sabbaticals, awards, including emeritus awards, those were all covered today. There are 2 things that I think are going to be pretty interesting that are coming back to the next ASA meeting on June 7th. And these are both system-wide interest. The first is there was a preliminary overview of the general education transfer credit alignment policy. It's on page 311 of the packet, and it's coming back again. I will say that the one thing that I inserted, because what it aims to do is basically say, as long as these courses in the Framework 30 have been mapped, right, the universities will accept them from any other university or college when they are offered in transfer. I know that at the community college, we are very concerned. There's a difference between an open enrollment institution and a non-open enrollment, and the way that you get them to be equivalent is that you provide adequate developmental education. But we talked last time about the elimination of the PA 1240 Council, et cetera, et cetera. So I have asked that at least be included in the conversation to make sure that there is a level of respect and trust to the academic standards across the system. So hopefully we'll get a little bit of that, and I'll make sure to follow up before the next meeting. The other thing of system-wide interest might be the enrollment projections. So there was a report put out that compared the enrollment projections at each of the institutions to actual enrollment for the past year, and that's going to be like an annual thing. Part 1 is enrollment projections, and part 2 is completions, I believe. So part 2 is coming up next, but part 1 was submitted at the beginning of May. So that will be reviewed in detail at the June 7th meeting and might be of some interest. And then Lori Lamb was not able to meet with us today. She's, like Brendan said, like triple booked for the day. However, she did present that report. She presented it to the CT State Senate, but she also presented it to the HR and Administration BOR committee. And that meeting is recorded. So it's the March 18th BOR HR and Administration Committee meeting if you want to take a look at that in the meantime. I think that's it.
Awesome. Thank you, Kalina. Thanks so much. I'm definitely going to have to go back to the ASA materials and look through that. Those are definitely very important things. So, and I'm curious to see how they're doing the enrollment assessment because, you know, financial aid packages went out so late. And so my hope is that they're doing a comparison, not sort of by date over time, but like offset a little bit to reflect the fact that the financial aid packages went out late. But I will take a look at that and see what it says. So next, let's talk a little bit about the third agenda item, which is a resolution that came out of, I believe, CT State Norwalk, and then also some concerns that were expressed in an op-ed about a CT State matter. Now, this came by way of a FAC member, this agenda item, so I don't know if that person would like to speak on this matter, or Kalina. I've read the materials, but I can't say I have sort of as firsthand information about them. So I don't know if you want to kick it off, Kalina, or.
I would want, if possible, so the Norwalk resolution, Lois is from Norwalk, if at all possible, you could introduce that. Lois, that would be helpful. As far as the complaint, I want to just be really clear. I'm happy to just cover that because I think that has to be really quick. We just acknowledge that it exists and what's happening with it. But I do want to make sure that we're very, very careful not to name any names because that could be a FERPA violation, right? So no names, please, but we can characterize what's happening. Lois, are you able to talk about the Norwalk resolution?
I think the Norwalk resolution speaks for itself. I just wanted to make sure it was everybody was aware of it and that it had been approved by the Senate and that President Maduka came to Norwalk on April 24th to discuss this, and it didn't necessarily particularly go very well. Because he kept insisting, we were questioning him on whether he had done anything about any of this stuff, and he kept saying that he had to, was important for him to come and see us and talk about this beforehand, and that he also needed an exhaustive list of stuff before anything could be done, and we kept pushing back on that and saying that this document already lists a bunch of things that are problematic. And the first item about the graphic design professional studies program, actually on the Friday before he came, the Curriculum Congress voted it down completely. And we were not, and they had 72 pages worth of documentation supporting the fact that this program was beneficial to our students and to the people that would be hiring our students, and much better than the program that currently exists through CT State. And that was totally ignored, and they voted it down. So bottom line is, he just kept saying that he, at one point when I said something to him about had he done anything to rectify any of the issues within the document, his response was no. And he had to come here to Norwalk first, and should he not have done that? And we responded back, others responded back saying, there are a lot of things that are problematic. Here's a list of them right here. You have them. Why aren't you working on them? And it was just back and forth, and it was not beneficial to anybody. Anyway, the resolution speaks for itself. I don't know that I have anything more to add to it. If anybody has any questions, you can, I'll try and answer them, but it is what it is.
Thank you, Louis. The one thing that I've kind of brought up recently that I don't know if this is exactly related to that resolution, but I potentially see a connection. Is that back in November, the FAC received a letter from Chair Ryan and Vice Chair McCarthy from the BOR, and it was a response to sort of a resolution that was passed by the FAC. And one item we brought up in that resolution was that, as far as we know, the the BOR has not met up with its statutory obligation to report to the General Assembly about how it is sort of maintaining the distinct and unique missions and goals of the different institutions. Now, I understand that CT State is now officially one institution, but just reading the resolution, it seems like Norwalk is saying, look, we have something that's important to our community that is unique, and it's sort of not being respected in some sense. I do potentially see a connection there between the fact that the legislature, when CSCU was established, put down a marker and said, we want to make sure you're preserving the unique characteristics of these campuses. As far as I know, the CSCU has not met the obligations to report on how they're doing that. And now we're hearing that, programs are running into roadblocks, even though they've been well justified for unique purposes. So I have asked where is the system office in looking at compliance with the statutes on reporting on how unique aspects of campuses are being supported. So go ahead, Lois.
This is not that particular program. This is not unique to graphic design. We're running into it right now with an ESL course that we've had for years, and the curricular committees want to do away with that course. We're not forcing it upon, like this graphic design program, we're not forcing it on anybody else. We're telling them, we need this stuff. It has worked for us. It has worked for our students. It continues to work for us. We want it. We're not pushing it on you. We want it. So we've got this in ESL. We had our medical assistant program during the consolidation process was torn apart. It was a fabulous program that was, again, supported by not only the students, but the employers in the area. And that was torn apart. We've been running into this continuously, and it's now getting worse.
There's a paralegal program also, right, Lois? Out of Norwalk?
We have a
Like other
paralegal
things?
program, yes.
Okay.
Andre, you have your hand up there?
Yeah, I'm been trying to unravel this Byzantine system for curriculum development that we have. I mean, I could talk for, well, hopefully at some point I'll actually put it down on paper, the critique and some suggestions. But I have a question. Way back when I was, well, whatever, 20, 30 years ago, when we put together a system for TUNCSYS for curriculum development. One of the things that we had to make sure is that all the meetings on curriculum, in fact, all meetings of a public institution, in fact, have to be open to public, don't they? Is that still a rule? Because the problem with one of the major problems with this system is that a lot of stuff happens, and most people are usually surprised by it because they don't know. They're not. We don't communicate the agenda for the SDCs or any parts of this thing. Okay, so people don't know. Don't necessarily know when some particular thing is going to be discussed, and it's if all the meetings are done on Zoom, okay, then well, if you're not invited, you don't get to. The public doesn't get to see. So if that still is the, if this open meeting, okay, rule is still there. Hasn't been repealed by the legislature. That's a major problem with the whole system. There's a few other major problems, and the thing is, decisions are being made, and it's a hit or miss kind of process. Okay, it all depends who happens to be there at the time and whether the information or any kind of input is actually considered. Because even if you look at the stupid form, when it's like, send it in triplicate. It's like. It's a whole different if it's an issue that you care about. You want to be there at the meeting, okay? And if people know that you're there at the meeting, they might even ask you for your opinion. Otherwise, what we get is a hit or miss process. That's anyway. I'm gonna try to put some ideas together because the problem is I've had all kinds of personal problems, but so eventually I'll get to it.
Thank you, Andre. Yeah, I do hope, I'll be happy to review anything you write up about this. Lois?
Yeah, that's another issue. It's not only that the meetings aren't open and available to people, they don't put out agendas, they don't have any minutes, they don't, they have many of them, most of them don't even have any bylaws. So they have
they're
no,
making
they
them
have
up.
no rule, they have no rules or regulations to support whatever they're doing. They just do what they want at the moment, whatever they feel like doing.
Yep.
And I mean, this is just insanity. They've been allowed to get away with this. And I'm not sure I understand it. As far as the NCC, confidence vote, it goes beyond that. We have something like 12 whereases in here. And so curriculum is certainly not the only one, although that's a very big one. There are lots of other things. And none of it is being corrected. It just keeps getting worse.
Yeah, I would hope that maybe the FAC could put together some proposals or suggestions, particularly from our community college members, CT State members, And we could maybe put those on the table at a BOR meeting if there's a way to improve or update this process. Because curriculum is key to so much of what we do. It's connected to the CSUs in terms of transferring students, and it's something we have to get right.
We can't support our students and our communities if we can't do what they want us, need us to do. And we have built and created over the years because we do work with our students and our communities. And Connecticut may be a small state, but it is a very diverse state because of its location. Fairfield County is incredibly different than anywhere else.
Agreed. Andre, I think your hand was up first, and then
Yeah, let me
Patrice.
just to give you another major idea or problem is that there's no room for experimental courses, okay, and there's no procedure for approving that on a local level or whatever. So if a lot of, at least at Tunx's, we had a lot of experimental courses that ran first as experimental courses. They were approved locally, didn't require a whole big process, and if it worked, the data, the experience was then used in the proposal, formal proposal, to make it a permanent thing. There's no room for that there. There's also no room for changes in policy. Okay, curriculum is not just a question of specifically defining what courses and programs. It also has to do with policies. Okay, and there is no process for that. No consideration, and no body that you send those kinds of proposals to. And the policies also include, in fact, the whole process. There's no way to amend the process formally, anyway. So it is a disaster. I mean, whoever designed it, well, okay, never mind. I won't say what should be done to them.
Okay, thanks, Andre. Patrice, go ahead.
Sorry, I didn't mean to raise my hand. It's okay. Thank you.
Sure. Okay, so let's follow up on this and see if we can develop some suggestions or guidelines. I'm sure the FAC would support what the faculty and staff would view as being helpful to address this matter. It's a little bit of a theme now. How are we going to start addressing things and improving things? And so if there's anything we could do, I think we should. Kalina, go ahead.
Yeah, I think part of it too is like everything is new and there are real communication issues, right? So I think in theory, maybe policy stuff goes to your senator, that goes to CT State Senate or something. I don't know. But like there's a lack of clarity, and even when we know that folks are doing it, when you have a statewide institution, it's just like they're just doing it over there. It does not feel like a usable process. So I do think it would be important for a bunch of us from CT State at FAC get together with some folks at CT State Senate and at least understand their perception of the state of governance, and then come to some sort of a factual assessment of where we actually are, where the gaps are. Because I genuinely feel like I don't know. I have no idea what the heck is going on. And it does seem that from one body to the next, as you say, Lois, because there are no bylaws that we know of, from one body to the next, they're analogous bodies, but they function differently. And apparently there are multiple paths to the same end. That's what it seems like. So yeah, maybe we can try to get to the bottom of it and help. Because this is, most of the time I think like got to leave the institutions alone and let them bring stuff here. But FAC is concerned with governance. That is our concern. And if we're seeing from the outside, it would be nice to just at least get a checkpoint.
Agreed. Absolutely. Lois?
My feeling is that complaints need to start being filed with the FAC, with the Board of Regents, with NECHI, it needs to be made, legislators need to understand what's going on here. It just needs to be, we cannot continue to allow this to happen. People are complaining to the people who are actually committing these things. So they're complaining to the committee and saying, oh, why are you doing this? How are you doing it? That's going to go nowhere because they're doing it. It needs to go well beyond that. And NECHI, in the last communication I had with them, came back and said, well, things can't be really all that bad because we're not getting any complaints. They need to start getting complaints.
In that case, Lois, can we just officially ask right now, we technically have, and we will send it out by email also, representation from each campus that our FAC reps ask that if there are complaints, confusions, whatever, that they be forwarded to us through the reps, so we get a sense of like what the issues are, in addition to whatever meeting we pull together.
I'm sorry, Colleen, I'm not quite sure I understand what you're asking.
I'm hoping that between this meeting and the next, well, actually, it's bad timing, but even still, right? It's end of semester at your last meeting, at your last governance meetings, at your campuses. Please let the general faculty and staff know that we would really like you, if you could collect the complaints and bring them in our direction, that would be helpful. Right? Because you just hear from a few folks, a few vocal folks here and there. I hear from stuff, but I have no idea what's really, really going on. So if we could actually collect some of these things and start getting to the bottom of what's factual, what's not factual, what's a communication error, we can go from there.
I have a concern about going through our governance structure, because our governance structure at the moment at Norwalk is I guess the only word I can use is incompetent. That resolution, that no confidence resolution that was voted on in March was never sent anywhere. So I ended up sending it to you guys at the FAC, because no confidence vote, if it sits there and does nothing and doesn't go anywhere, then what's the point?
Andre, I saw your hand up there.
Yeah, at Tunxis, they actually, the PSO voted actually at the beginning of the year to reestablish the local academic affairs committee. And I was kind of charged with that task. The problem is that we have already like 30 people involved in curriculum design. If you had put together all the SDCs and SACs and God knows what else. And to have yet another group of people or have a subgroup of it, I don't think it's possible to create something like that as an add-on to what's there. The only thing that can be done is to reform the system we have, and then within that make room for some kind of better organization at the local level. But I mean, the problem is that the whole system, it has to be basically redesigned. I mean, drastically redesigned. It is so dysfunctional. You guys just mentioned some of the problems. It's horribly dysfunctional. And indeed, there are no bylaws, there are no rules. All these various committees are making up rules as they go along. There's no uniformity from campus to campus. I mean, it's just a horrible mess. And we are supposed to be, as faculty, in charge of curriculum, but with this kind of organization, it's just not possible for that to be true. It's just who happens to be, there at a particular time, and God knows what, it's a hit or miss process, totally dysfunctional.
Can I just add that in terms of the preserving the unique missions of the institutions, community colleges, part of the mission is their community, right?
Yes.
But the design of this statewide community college, which Lois has always said is an oxymoronic term, the design is that it do precisely the opposite, that it provide one standard solution across the state rather than a localized solution to different communities for people who will remain local. And of course, the other thing is the open enrollment institutions need different kinds of developmental education that actually meets the needs of their specific locality also.
Well, thank you, everybody. I did see Jen Long in the chat saying, I think, that she's going to try to gather some information about on this topic, and let's definitely try to roll up as much of the information we can gather on what's happening, and then kind of proceed from there. But yeah, curriculum is just so important that we do have to get this right. So let's continue to work on it and talk about it. And if there's not more on this, I'd like to turn to our next agenda item, which is a statement on peaceful protest, a proposed resolution. And so I will put it on the screen. Let me do that now. I'm not necessarily going to read the whole thing out here, but and I saw there's a typo in the title, so I will fix that. This is the FAC to the Board of Regents resolution concerning the use of force against peaceful demonstrations. There are a few whereases. The first is expressing concern about the increasing instances of the use of force against peaceful demonstrations on university and college campuses. We emphasize the right of peaceful assembly and freedom of expression. We reaffirm the importance of universities and colleges as spaces for free exchange of ideas, critical thinking, and civil discourse. We express alarm about the excessive use of force, particularly these days in response to peaceful demonstrations on campuses. Excuse me. We uphold and protect the rights of individuals to peaceful assembly. And we acknowledge that peaceful demonstrations are essential components of democratic societies. So by way of resolution, we call upon authorities and governments and educational institutions to respect and uphold the rights of individuals to peaceful assembly. We urge all parties involved in demonstrations, including student demonstrators, to engage in dialogue. We encourage educational institutions to establish clear guidelines and protocols for handling demonstrations. And we call on accountability. We call for our accountability and justice for any violations of human rights and excessive use of force against peaceful demonstrators. So I've introduced this, and so I wanted to kind of open up the discussion on this draft resolution and hear what people think about it. I think for me, it's been interesting to see that certain campuses have been able to approach things in a manner where there's a sort of mutually agreed resolution, and parties are able to sort of move forward without involving use of force. But on other campuses, we're not seeing that pathway. And so I will stop there. I think I saw Vu raised his hand.
Yeah, I'm all for peaceful demonstration, but what's the purpose of this resolution? I'm not so clear on that one.
I think the purpose is just to sort of reinforce certain approaches to peaceful demonstration and free expression on campuses. It's not a response to anything in particular that has happened on any campus that I'm aware of. But I think that was the intention. I don't know if that answers your question, Vu.
It does, thank you.
Mark, go ahead.
Yeah, so yeah, to me, the resolution just seems common sense in many ways, but where common sense fails is I'm just wondering the exact definition of peaceful.
Yeah.
So, that can be problematic. One person's peaceful is another person's obnoxious, becoming another person's criminal. So,
Yes.
is peacefully occupying a building. So I'm just concerned about the legalese aspect of just that.
And holding somebody against their will too. No, I mean, if I may speak, this resolution, I'm certainly all in favor of the First Amendment and rights of people to demonstrate and so on. I've been in demonstrations myself on numerous occasions. However, they do indeed have to be peaceful. And unfortunately, the way the resolution is written, it focuses almost entirely on the violence against the demonstrators by the police. But it only mentions in the very last part that, gee, it'd be nice to make sure that everything's indeed peaceful, and people ought to be held accountable if it's not peaceful. Well, that's indeed a one-sided resolution. And like I said, I think if we do want a resolution, it ought to make clear indeed the definition of peaceful, and make a strong statement in favor of that right. Yes, I think it may be worth saying something about, gee, police ought to be, act responsibly as well. Let's put it that way. Maybe we can define what that means. But I'm not in favor of this resolution, not in this form.
Okay, Lois. Thank you, Andre. Lois?
I kind of had the same question that Vu had about who is this? Would this be directed at? Or where's this going?
There are two more hands. I don't know, Kalina, were you gonna respond to that, or?
I was gonna, I mean, in terms of yes, I'll just take a stab at it, really, in terms of, and sure, you're really the person to answer, but as I read it, I just think about the fact that we're going into graduation season and the number of disruptions that there have been. We don't have the kinds of campuses where people camp out and demand divestment because, we don't have that kind of money. But we might have graduates who
We're not worth occupying, right?
But we might have graduates who make statements, and we are kind of, I think, in terms of introducing it now, setting a sort of tone, perhaps, as to the kinds of accommodation of dissenting, opinion that we might choose to tolerate at our events. So that's how I view it, and I'm really grateful that you thought of doing this at this time, because things seem to be escalating. Whether or not we have exactly the right language or tone, or is a different issue, but I see that as important.
Thanks, Kalina. Jonathan?
Yeah, I think that the focus on the police violence is warranted, just because in recent events that seems to be the main source of most of the violence. In terms of defining peaceful, that might be that's a huge philosophical question and maybe beyond the scope of this resolution. So I'd hate to see what is a pretty anodyne resolution sunk because we can't come up with a perfect definition of peaceful. So I think it's a an appropriate and timely resolution, and I would support it, if not a stronger resolution.
Okay, thank you, Jonathan. Andre?
Well, maybe we can define what is not peaceful.
I mean, you could make a list of things, but I think defining not peaceful probably has the same obstacles as defining peaceful. I'm not against tweaking it and maybe putting in some examples.
Okay.
Lois?
If you're defining not peaceful, aren't you also having to define peaceful
Yes.
as well? Because it's the opposite.
Well, maybe easier to do, though. It's like pornography, right? I know it when I see it.
Oh, I have no comment on that.
I'm just
No,
quoting
we-
the Supreme Court Justice.
I did hear the invocation of the field of philosophy. We do have at least one philosopher here who in the comments said no destruction of property or bodily harm, as maybe those would be examples of non-peaceful actions that we could cite as crossing the line or crossing out of the realm of peaceful. Go ahead, Kalina.
I might also say that, like, it is right. We have different conceptions of what peace might be. We live in a country where we actually have the right to be annoying, to be obnoxious, to be right. That we have that right to be downright pigs if we choose to be. And that is something that we must cultivate at our institutions most of all. So maybe just the non-violence, where violence is understood as physical violence of any sort, might actually communicate better, right? Because maybe people don't associate being dissent or obnoxiousness even with peace, but it's certainly not physical violence. So I don't know if that'd be helpful to just strike out physical violence.
I like that suggestion. That's certainly one possibility. We could replace peaceful with nonviolent. Andre?
Yeah, an additional thought. I mean, the question is why do we what purpose would a resolution like this serve? Even though we don't have any anything major happening right now, I think indeed coming on graduation season or whatever, seeing what's going on in the rest of the country, yeah, it could happen. Okay, and if we had such a resolution, I think it might be helpful to both the administration in terms of figuring out how to react, and perhaps to the people that are going to be demonstrating as well. So it could serve I think a positive purpose.
Thanks, Andre. Mary did put an important observation in the chat, so I hope people will review that as well. I do want to mention that there was an episode, I believe over the past year on one of our campuses where a student who I think was engaged in nonviolent activity when a government official was visiting a campus, that student was detained by police, I believe, while that government official was on campus. And that caused some concern for me personally, just reading reports about that. So yeah, I do think making statements like this, encouraging sort of resistance from or resistance to deploying police in nonviolent situations is maybe helpful, but I'll stop there. I didn't know, Mary, I think did you turn your camera on? Did you want to say something? I wasn't sure.
No, I
Yeah,
just
go ahead.
appreciate the conversation. I'm trying to listen and learn from all of you. This is such a complicated committee. You cover so much ground. It's a serious topic. I'm married to a Jewish man. I'm not Jewish, but most of my friends are. They go to Israel regularly. They've been pulling their kids out of these schools because they're afraid for their safety. But at the same time, I'm really glad to see young people standing up and having a strong feeling the world needs that. I don't think it's been handled well, but I agree. I'm not sure what we want the resolution to do for us, and I feel like as a person who's a writer, it's a bit fuzzy right now, and I feel like the issues are so serious that fuzziness is kind of a dangerous thing.
Thank you, Mary. Thank you. Kat?
apologies for the ignorance that might be behind this question, but if the resolution, if we were to pass this, where does it live? How does it get out to folks? Is there an email that's sent? Does it simply live online? What kind of happens after that?
What address do we send it to?
So I think it's fair to say that there's not necessarily a established process for doing that. What I've seen in the past is that the chair of the FAC will maybe read a resolution like this at a board meeting, but there are other options where resolutions are passed to board subcommittees who then do work in response to those resolutions. So either or both of those routes are possible. We also have campus leaders who, in this case, may be in the position to make a decision in response to events on their campus. And it would probably be important to, in this case, to communicate something like this to those campus leaders as well. So it's a little bit case by case, but FAC members are always welcome to circulate these resolutions to their campuses. If they're ever, if they are passed by the committee, I've done that at Eastern. That's one way things get distributed. But certainly, since we are advisory to the BOR, the key thing is to get resolutions like this to them. And then kind of if we want to do more work beyond that, then that's something we can do. So.
And can I just say that it's also something that we can decide if we vote on it, right? Who it needs to be delivered to and how, right? So we could send it immediately to like CSU administration, or to the presidents of each of the institutions and the BOR, et cetera. So we can decide what would be most useful also.
Thanks, Kalina. Andre, I think you have your hand up.
Yeah, just to follow up on Mary's comment. There are unfortunately quite a lot of instances where some of the rhetoric has been pretty anti-Semitic, and people indeed do feel threatened. Question is, how do we define that, and how do we address that? I mean, I think in a resolution of this type or this issue, it probably ought to touch on that as well, and I'm not quite sure how to approach it, other than make a statement, gee, anti-Semitism is bad, but at what point does rhetoric become indeed threatening and making people feel threatened?
Good question, Andre. Kalina?
I think that's a good point. I mean, because I think that's one of the benefits of these kinds of things playing out on our campuses, right? We are well placed to make a distinction that many people do not make between a political position on the existence of or the activities of a particular government as opposed to the identity of people that are closely linked with that government, right? And the fact that people conflate that, have always conflated it, continue to conflate it, is really dangerous. It's actually dangerous to people of Jewish descent everywhere. So to have these conversations, as uncomfortable as they may be, on our campuses when they happen in these places, is such an advantage because people have been holding this misconception, and it has been dangerous to people for decades and decades, right? If not longer. So that said, I think I agree that perhaps some statement that acknowledges that this is political speech about the actions of our government and the governments of another nation, and nothing to do with attacking the identities or even the citizens of those nations is very, very important, because it can also serve as its own tool for education.
Well,
So I don't know how to phrase that, but I do think that that is important.
Go ahead, Andre.
yeah, we had an interesting thing happen at Tunxus. Okay, there was a proposal for bringing a speaker to talk about specifically the plight of the Palestinians. Well, in any case, it didn't happen, okay? But what we had, we had a discussion following that, and the idea came up that maybe what we ought to do is indeed have a panel discussion of the issue. Now, let's try to put this discussion in a format which is nonviolent and academic rather than emotional, purely emotional. I don't know if that's possible, but that would be a goal.
Yeah, I agree, Andre. I think those there's so much happening that requires or that would benefit from discussions like that. There's so much history. There's so many aspects to what's happening that
Pretty tragic history too.
yeah, that an educational piece of things is really, really important. Mary, had your hand up?
I had an intern who was working at what used to be the Harvard Seminary, but is now called something like the Harvard International Center for Peace. And their goal is to figure out the common ground for the world's religions. And he said they ran a really good program there where they had people from different points of view on all of this present, and no one was allowed to ask questions, but they had to listen. And he said it was very powerful, and we can maybe ask them what they did for their programming, because it turned out to be quite effective. It wasn't, the students there didn't, they seemed to manage, the conversation seemed like it was fair, and my student intern was really blown away about how they handled it, because their total goal was about having excellent communications. And the director communications there, Susan Schornberg, has worked with Central a lot, and she's a real pro. I mean, she was at the Current for 15 years, and they might have some sort of template for us, and theirs seemed to work.
Yeah, that I mean, I know that center and several people there. Indeed, it is probably the best institution to talk to about this kind of thing. They can help.
Thanks so much. Yeah, that it would be great to be able to hold a forum on this topic of some sort. Timing is a little tough with the semester wrapping up, but Vu, did you ever hand up?
Yeah, I do have one concern about, or multiple, but the first, whereas the FAC is deeply concerned by the increasing instance of the use of force against peaceful demonstration. I'm not sure if that statement is made based on any information or stats, or just skeptical news that you see on TV, read, or anything like that. I can't say one way or another that's founded by any real information.
Yeah, that's fair. I haven't, yeah, I'm not aware of any sort of quantification of whether the response in this case is involves more force than we've seen in similar episodes in the past. And part of it, part of the challenge in quantifying these things is we're kind of talking about very rare events, and there's just not a whole lot of data you can sort of collect from them. But I do take your point. That's a very good observation. So I don't know if there's more. Mary, I see your hand. Is that an old? Oh, okay.
No, I should have put it down. Sorry about that.
Yeah. No worries. No worries. So we can table this. We can amend it to fix the typo, concern into concerning, replace peaceful with nonviolent throughout, and then make a statement about Kalina's point about the demonstrations relating to government actions and not the identity
speech,
of,
yeah.
of people. Sorry, go ahead. Sorry.
No, that's right. That's right.
Okay.
Yeah, we'd have to do a little work on phrasing it, but
Yeah. So we could make those amendments and consider it as amended, or but at this point, yeah, if someone on the committee wants to make a motion to table, amend, we could kind of go from there.
Or approve, given
Or
the
approve.
timing with graduation, yeah.
Mhm. Yep.
I will make a motion to approve if there's a second, with the amendments that you just listed.
Well, perhaps we should see the amendments first. So why don't we just table it and then bring it back up next meeting with you know, have a couple of people work on it.
Lois, go ahead. Oh, I think you're muted, Lois.
I agree with Andre, but I would be careful with the term table because it's a little complicated in Robert's rules. I would just say defer it to the next meeting.
Okay.
And have some people work on it. I'd be willing to volunteer if that, if you need people.
And the other thing, you might also just distribute a draft at some point for comments. Okay, because yeah, I think it's worth having it, and you know, this kind of thing. I think it can serve good purpose, but yeah, it's got to be really, you know, crafted, you know, carefully.
Right. And Pamela, thanks for your comment there. Something we could discuss at the joint BOR FAC meeting, which I think is our next agenda item. So let's, I think the term you used, Lois, was defer. Go ahead, sorry, Lois. Lois, you can, do you have your hand up, Lois?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm going to be a little bit off top. I'm going to be off topic, definitely. But I had somebody get in touch with me and I went and looked and there is no link to view this particular meeting live. Is there any reason for that?
We have not been streaming FAC meetings live for
Ever.
ever. Now, the way we've done it was we've recorded it and then posted.
Oh, okay. I wasn't aware of that. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So, but we are working on figuring out the technology to do it live, but we just haven't implemented it yet. So.
And the WebEx link is publicly available of the meeting posted.
Oh,
so
and
everyone
that
can
I
actually
understand.
join the meeting. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're public.
Okay, so yeah, so we will work on revising that resolution. And let's move to the next agenda item, which is the joint BOR FAC meeting in June. In the last meeting, we had a number of presentations that FAC members put together for the BOR. That's there's not a lot of time to put something like that together, but you know, I think it's fair to say that it's sort of an opportunity if people would like to do something like that. But the question would be, do members of the FAC have ideas for maybe a theme of that meeting, or different topic areas? What would you like to do with the agenda for that meeting? Are there any thoughts on that?
Maybe we'll be ready with discussing curriculum development. I'm kind of not sure that I can actually do what I want to do, but I think we should at least bring it up as a possible discussion point.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And you know, as I mentioned earlier, it's, you know, the CSUs have a shared interest in that topic. You know, I think a lot of people have interest in seeing if we can encourage CT State sort of alumni to, you know, join our campuses, the CSU campuses, to get that right. You know, we need to do work on curriculum and sort of course equivalencies. I was talking with a colleague, and you know, one way to look at things is we did have these TAP arrangements with the 12 individually accredited institutions, but now there's a brand new institution. And I guess we're all just kind of assuming that all of those equivalencies transferred over to the new institution, but
Not necessarily.
right. So maybe curriculum is the theme that we should center that on, that meeting. What do people think? Kat, you have your hand up?
All right, I meant to give the thumbs up. I'm good with curriculum being the theme.
Okay, thank you. I think Kalina, you had your hand up, and then John.
Yeah, so I was gonna suggest, but feel free to shoot this down, that we brainstorm a bit and then maybe assemble a small group to see what's actually feasible. Cause like, I like the curriculum thing, but I also feel like part of the issue is that it's so unwieldy. Like, are we even gonna know what we're talking about by June 14th? So, if we could, if folks agree. The other thing is that we can just put our heads down and try to get there by June 14th, but I'm almost dead, so I'll try. But yeah, so that's the other thing. Maybe we can also brainstorm and hope we can get there on curriculum.
All right, so yeah, maybe we'll do a working group. I think we just have to be careful to avoid having quorum. Is that right? If we have a subset of folks trying to develop the plan for the joint meeting. But maybe I can try to schedule something like that, and we can talk about whether curriculum is the right topic or whether other things are. But we'll sort of pencil in curriculum as the focus of things at this point, based on the discussion. Other comments on that agenda item? Okay, and Pam mentioned in the chat that we would have to have documents for the joint meeting shared by June 7th. Thank you, Pam. Okay.
One more thing.
Mhm.
When we talk about curriculum, we're definitely talking about CT state curriculum process, et cetera, perhaps as related to the sort of the new transfer policy and so on. But is there anything specific or unique to the universities that would need to be explored or discussed? Or would it be a very CT state heavy conversation?
I think there are some issues that I've sort of heard about on the university campuses. I think there has been, and I don't know if this is continuing, but I think there has been feedback about sort of allegedly duplicative academic programs when they're proposed on one campus. They maybe seem to encounter a little bit more resistance going through the process, and there are definitely concerns when it comes to that. There are issues, I think, with sort of the focus on having a certain minimum threshold you need to achieve before introducing a new program. And that's really difficult, right? Because it's hard to guarantee certain programs will yield a certain number of students ahead of time. And so those also have been, I guess, some barriers to introducing new programs. So yeah, I do think those are two issues I'm aware of, but I don't know if other CSU reps have perspectives on this or opinions. Yeah, go ahead, Mike. Yep.
And when you said duplicative, I think you mean, I just want to clarify that certain schools don't want to not be able to offer something because it's been offered, right? I mean, we're in favor of duplication. And what you run into is the BOR not wanting to duplicate, thinking, well, they can go to that school if they want to take it. And that's kind of an unrealistic understanding of how our students function. So, because a person may go to a school, not just to major there, they go there for lots of other reasons. So, you know, anyway, I just want to clarify that it's the duplicative part is, you know, we're in favor of sometimes duplication, and it seems like the BOR is trying to not duplicate programs, and I don't quite understand why. I'd like to know what you know, what their thinking is and what they think the upside is, because I'm sure there is an upside, but I think they need to be told, reminded of what the downside is too. And then the other thing about is, I do think there should be some, I think there's some concern, at least in the CSUs, about the 120 credits. So many programs need 70 or 80 credits in their program. And that seems absurd, right? I mean, the traditional understanding of American higher ed was that you did 1/3 in your major and 1/3 in general education and 1/3 in free electives. So you could explore things that you know won't get in the rest of your life, or maybe lifelong learning or something. And it just seems like when you have programs that require 60, 70, 80 credits, they're just saying, well, you need all these credits in our program. And so it usually comes out of the free electives or out of the gen ed program. And it just, I would like to see a healthy restoration of a balance of 1/3, 1/3, 1/3, because I think a lot of times programs add courses because an accrediting agency says, well, you need to cover this material now, but it doesn't get rid of stuff that they don't necessarily need to cover anymore. Or sometimes you don't need a whole course to cover that thing. You can add it into another course. And I understand that's somewhat cumbersome for a department to do, but that's part of their accrediting agency's situation. So I just find it, I just think we're cheating students out of having a richer college experience by making the majors bigger and bigger. And also when the majors can kind of dip into the gen ed, then the gen ed's not really gen ed anymore because they have to take this particular course for that major. I just find that all problematic, and I would like to sort of have them, I wouldn't mind bringing that up.
Great, thanks, Mike. Yeah, those are great points. And absolutely, I think you know, I think it's too often the case that programs are labeled duplicative. And I'm not in favor of seeing resistance to programs on the campus just because something, you know, that looks vaguely like it exists somewhere else in our state. I don't think we should let that hold back innovation on our individual campuses. So I completely agree with you on that point.
And the other point I just want to reinforce was that often when you're doing that, when you're kind of cutting into other courses with these big majors, it's often professional programs, and they're kind of cutting into the students' humanities experience. Because sooner, you know, arts and humanities often get cut in those situations because the emphasis on STEM, and all of that's important economically, but the other stuff, you know, humanities are pretty important for the soul. And so I just think that, you know, again, I would like to remind we don't want to just be training workers. We're trying to create engaged, well-rounded citizens. So thanks.
Yeah, no, I think those are things we should definitely touch on. Andre?
Yeah, I've done quite a bit of curriculum design, and including getting the nursing program at Gateway. The problem is there's a wider sort of philosophical problem, which I don't think we have any chance of changing, and that is how these degrees are defined. Okay, they're limited to precise number of credits, hours, and stuff like that. And for instance, a program like nursing, okay, an associate's degree in nursing with 60 hours of clinicals a week, you know, it probably ought to have a lot more credits. Maybe it should be, you know, an associate's degree that is 3 years long instead of 2. The point is that we are stuck in these very rigid definitions that do not, you know, what's the word, support the notion of well, it's not flexible, okay, enough for many programs, okay. But I don't think there's a chance in hell that we can ever change that. It comes down from God or something. It's set in stone. But that's the real problem.
Thanks, Andre. Thank you. Right. So I don't think I see any new hands on this topic. So Now, so we will skip the sixth item. Lori Lamb wasn't able to make it unless anyone wants to say anything about shared services, but we do also have an area for new and old business. I will say that as follow-up to our discussion of the new technology committee, we are going to be able to send somebody as a participant on that committee who can contribute during the meeting and outside of executive session and talk about and return and share with us things that they heard and noted during the meeting. So if you have a nomination for somebody who knows technology well, and particularly if the interaction of technology and pedagogy and curriculum, please don't hesitate to forward that name. I saw Mike Shea's hand, so go ahead, Mike.
Uh-oh.
Sorry, I think you muted, Mike.
Sorry. God. Okay. I'm sorry about that. I hate to show my ignorance on this, but on item 6, what is shared services? What's that term mean? What were we going to be talking about? Maybe you don't know, or it looks like Vu knows.
I don't know if Vu had his hand up, I think, on the technology committee, but I think of shared services as a part of students first involving consolidation of functions like payroll, human services.
Oh, you mean I understand that across campus. Yeah, okay, sure.
Yeah.
It just didn't. Okay.
We envy your ignorance, Mike.
Yeah. That was too easy. I thought this was something different. Okay, thank you.
Sure. Sure. Kalina, did you have your hand? Oh, okay. Vu, I see your hand.
Thank you. Actually, I do have more questions with the technology committee. What would be the expectation of that? I know you mentioned about going to the meeting, come back and sharing the information here, but what would that member be able to do as part of that technology committee? Or vote or et cetera, et cetera?
So I will give an example of why this might be useful, or helpful and actually important. There was a draft document circulated that faculty became aware of on the CSU campuses related to a sort of new plan for emeritus email accounts. And so there was a lot of email back and forth about where did this policy come from? What is this policy trying to achieve? And actually, the new technology committee was kind of invoked as part of that email exchange. Like, oh, is it the new technology committee that came up with this? And so just having a faculty member who was informed of what was happening there would have helped a great deal in that exchange, so we could reach out to that member of the FAC and say, do you know about this? Is it coming from this committee? I just think if we have a sort of a specialist who's participating there and keeping staying in the flow of discussion, and then if our committee has a concern or passes something, they could present that to the technology committee. I think I'm seeing that being the role of the person just attending the meetings, keeping track of what's happening, reporting here, and serving as a resource. Does that answer your question, Vu?
It does. Thank you very much.
Sure. Pam?
Thank you. I think it was Vu who asked what the lift would be in terms of the requirements of this committee. Timing is really good. The next meeting of the technology committee is going to talk about future committee work. There is not a whole lot of work that has been done. They've met once, twice. I think they have not taken on any action. There has been no no resolutions approved or submitted to the full board for approval yet, but they're going to start talking about their agenda for the next several months. They will be meeting whenever the board is in session, which means they will be meeting 7 times a year. It's either the second or third Wednesday of the month, and they meet at noontime on Wednesdays for approximately an hour. This person would have that time commitment as well as any prep work of documents that would be sent out in advance of that meeting. The person would be a non-voting member as a participant, not as an appointment to the committee. So we would, the technology committee would like it to be an FAC member, but would not be able to join committee in executive session or anything like that. Is that a little bit more in terms of specifics?
Yeah, that's great, Pam. Thank you so much.
Okay.
That's very helpful. Awesome. And yeah, and Kalina, you know, suggested reading agendas and participating, attending. So we can just leave that open-ended. If someone wants to volunteer or wants to volunteer someone else on the FAC, just,
Who's
you know,
absent today?
Say again, Andre?
Who's absent today?
Yes, that'll. So yeah, just let me and Kalina know, and hopefully it's a good opportunity to you know, work with some BOR members, and technology is extremely important. You know, I think at least at Eastern, we're still getting up to speed on, you know, AI and the use of AI in classes. I'm not even claiming that this committee is working on that, but you know, clearly technology is an
Maybe we
extremely
can
important topic for our
replace them
campuses.
with AI.
What's that?
Maybe we can
Brendan,
replace them with AI.
Pamela has her hand up.
Oh yeah, Pam, go ahead.
Thank you. As you go through your next cycle of elections, if this is going to be a regular participatory kind of role for FAC, you might want to tease that in terms of an opportunity for a faculty member with this level of expertise or this interest as part of their participation.
That's a good idea. Thank you, Pam. Thanks so much. Thank you. Okay, so I don't know if anyone has any other bits of new or old business they'd like to discuss, but that was our last agenda item. So
Motion to adjourn?
yeah, we could do motion to adjourn. Vu, you're getting a lot of support in the chat participating on the technology committee, but I've heard a motion to adjourn, so we can do that. I will stop the recording. Thank you, everybody. Good luck with the end of your semester. Thanks for all you're doing on our campuses, and we'll be in touch. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Have a good weekend.
Have a nice weekend.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good
Thank
weekend.
you.
All right, bye.
Have a good weekend.